the Top Pot Supplies and the International Ceramics Festival short films will be screened in the cinema at lunchtime. So if you haven't had a chance to see them, there's some fantastic entries this year, some really inspirational short films, quite a really good collection actually, and they'll be screening in the cinema at lunchtime today. So Adam, I think you ready? You good to go?
I'm good to go, I think.
Okay. So welcome everybody to our demonstration today. We have Adam solo on the stage today, and I'm sure you're all feeling buoyed up and inspired after Keith's talk. So we're going to ask Adam what he's going to be doing in the demo today before he starts. So Adam, over to you.
What are you asking me, sorry?
What you're going to be doing in the demo.
Well, I thought I'm not going to do any throwing today. My pot here, which I'm really pleased with, I've thrown this handle earlier. You throw it by making a cylinder. I'm just going to...
What do you mean you're really pleased with that? What do you mean you're really pleased with that?
I quite like it. Keith, mate.
Just have a look at the cross-section, shall we?
You fucking what? You bastard.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
What have I got to do? Make it again?
Make a bloody another one.
Oh. Jesus. Right. Well, there you go. Doing it again.
Oh. Just so you know, he did know that was going to happen.
Yeah, so a big part of what I do is replicating. So I make things over and over and over again. And people ask if it gets boring. Sometimes it's, you have to get in the right mindset. But ultimately, making things is always a pleasure, so I'm going to try and make something very similar. So in order to do that, obviously you have your weight of clay, so you use the same weight of clay, and I would normally have a marker, but for this exercise it's not practical. And it's the finest piece of technology. It's a little willow twig, just mounted on a bit of clay normally. And this clay is soft flower pot clay. In fact, it's very soft, a bit too soft. If anyone wants to ask any question, you probably have to speak up, but just shout me the question. It's grogged, it's got 8% grog in it. So when we make the clay, we take all the grit out of it, and then we reintroduce an inert grog after it's been washed, pressed. The first pugging is when we put the grog back in it. Sorry, I can't quite hear.
Repeat the question.
There's no secret. This is the third one. I've got a bit of a lump there, but that's life. So yeah, the flower pot clay doesn't like being overthrown, so it's not very forgiving. If you try and work it too much, it gets sort of softer and softer, and you could put a fourth pull in, but the likelihood is instead of making it taller, you'll make it start to sag. And I was explaining to people yesterday about centering. If you think of your ball of clay as the ocean or the sea, with waves and ripples on the surface, underneath is perfectly calm, still water. So you're not in fact centering the whole piece of clay, you're just trying to calm the surface.
The question, I think, was the clay that you use from Stourbridge. What pit does
The
it
pit
come
is
from?
unfortunately closed. It's a fire clay. I don't actually know the address of the pit, but it was a very large pit. Before it shut, I was able to organise buying and transporting 2,000 tonnes. Which sounds like a lot, but it's probably about 8 years worth. So it's not, it's the minor part in the clay mix. The major part being very local to the pottery. And that's a local brick clay. Say again? I can't hear. No, it's called Blockley. Oh, it's called Blockley. Blockley's a little village, and there's a local brickworks called Northcote Bricks, and they very kindly, because I had a real problem trying to store 2,000 tonnes of clay, obviously, because it's not going to go anywhere fast. So they kindly allowed me to store the clay on their site. Yeah, sure.
I think a question was, can you describe what you're going to do with your hands when you're centering and you're pulling? Can you describe what you're doing with your hands?
Yeah, I'll try. So, start at the bottom. Pretty much, if you can centre that, look, if you can get that centred, you can sort of roll that centeredness up. So I'm literally just moving the outside of the clay. And that's...
As in he
it's
can, not you can.
I'm not... it requires some strength, but it's more about the technique of moving just what you need to, rather than the whole lot. I also use the weight of my upper body. And for this section, I want it quite wide, so that means I have to spread the clay out roughly to the width I want it.
If you didn't hear that comment, it said, no strength but still rippling muscles.
I didn't say no strength, I said you don't necessarily need a lot of strength. And that's one of the nice things about getting more experienced. As you get older, your kind of skill level goes up, and your experience level, and your technique improves, and that sort of helps to offset one's failing, aching body. It's a nice thought that when I can no longer physically handle making big pots, I can always drop down and make lovely plates and mugs and jugs and things.
I'm intrigued. Over many years I've been on this stage and watching all the potter's nods that I've seen over the time, and I'm sure Jim will testify to this. We've seen some fantastic potter's nods, but interestingly, Adam doesn't nod as he's pulling, just at the end of the pull. Right at the end. A very unique nod. Oh, he will when he has to move, yeah. You can see your seat up on the screen. The camera. You can't move it, sorry. Question? Yeah. There was a question, Adam, that you seem to be pulling from the inside. Are you pulling from the inside and supporting on the outside?
Yeah, so your left hand leads, so you create the movement with your inside hand, and then your outside hand controls and manipulates that movement. So I always move first with my left hand, then with my right hand, and I lift. You imagine an S, you're creating the bulge, and then you just gently twist it up. I mean, that's the nice thing about watching big wear, is that you can kind of see the movements a little bit easier, because if it's a tiny little thing, it's kind of done so fast you can't really see what's happening. Right, this was the bit that I felt very self-conscious about yesterday, which is making a horrible racket, so I apologise for that. It's making me sweat out last night's cider. That's a good question. So
The question was,
It's
when you're,
still-
sorry, I'll just repeat the question because the audience can't all hear it. When you're torching the clay, what sort of dryness are you looking for?
it's still malleable enough to work. So, you can see it's still pretty soft, but it just gives enough stiffness. Obviously, the outside skin is kind of stiffer than the inside, which is still very soft. So it's really a kind of experimentation, and if you've never done it before, the tendency is to overblast. But as you gain confidence, you can just leave it wetter and wetter, or softer and softer, i.e. less and less blasting, and then you'll find the place where it collapses. It's the most important part about making pots, is not being afraid to mess up, basically. I know we all get attached to our pots, but you learn much, much more if you push the limits. If you always hold back and never ruin anything, always try and get a pot off the wheel, it means that you're not pushing the sort of outer limits of your possibilities. And that's probably why I make big pots, is because you try and challenge yourself more and more and more. And that's the beauty of it. Forever. Ad infinitum. The largest pot is carefully calculated to shrink down into the kiln. It's about 6 foot wide by about, tallest is about 1.6 meters, 1.7, and then it shrinks down. Did Keith give me my wire back? Because that might be a problem. Can anyone see my wire?
Does Keith still have it?
Keith, take it off.
I think he might have done.
Keith stole your wire.
Myself and Jim were commenting yesterday that
Bodie,
when
there's a
Adam
roll of
did
wire
this,
on the side.
in the
Oh, there
past
you
when we have a demonstration of this scale and someone is flipping over a board with that weight of clay in it, there's usually 2 assistants helping and an awful lot of measuring like this and lining up and da-da-da-da-da. And Adam just does it in one swift movement, which I think, if you've not seen it before, is just extraordinary.
I think I might have to get Keith back to destroy this one at the end, because it's...
I'm sure he'll oblige.
Right. So I'm going to throw this in pretty much exactly the same way as you throw a bowl. So you want to narrow a base, and then I'm going to flare it out to get the shape of the shoulder. I'd normally be working on about four pots at the same time, so that allows the pot to even up, basically. So by the time you get back to the first one, it's had a good chance to rest after the blast.
The question is, how big is your kiln? How many pots can you fit into it of
Well,
these sizes?
jars are particularly sort of space consuming because you can't really put anything on top of them. So the kiln's about 400 cubic foot, and depending on what pots you have, you can get, hundreds. The bigger pots are often designed to stack inside each other. So you might, if you have a big pot like this, shaped like that, you might get 4 or 5 in a stack. Because they all have drainage holes, you can put a prop in the drainage hole and then put a bat on top of the prop, pop the next pot in, and then chock the rim. Chock the rim, so you get chunks of either broken prop or specifically made, a bit like a pan ring. I don't know whether any of you saw Russell's pan rings, but you can make a similar thing to chock a pot, so it stops the stack wobbling around when you push the kiln in, because they're trolley kilns, our kilns. I mean, obviously in the firing they do move around as well as they shrink. So this clay shrinks roughly 14%, but obviously stonewares often shrink 20 or more. And that obviously has to be factored in if you want to maximise your kiln space. The earthenware fires to 1060, the firing temperature.
Can you
Sorry?
repeat that question?
This is earthenware clay, yeah. These two were £45, and this was 20. So you're looking about 110.
What's the shrinkage of your clay?
The shrinkage is on this one is 14.
14% is a lot
14%, yeah.
of disappointment when it comes out, isn't it?
It is disappointing because you make a big part and it comes out looking.
Can I check your wiring?
You can, yeah.
I think it's driving me a bit mad.
You got it?
Yeah.
Thanks. Just no water. So when I'm making these, it's quite easy to get distracted by different parts of the pot. So I imagine this is going all over the place. Well, I'm sort of concentrating here, so you can recenter. Hopefully I can recenter. So because you've turned the section upside down, the top, which was the bottom, is always thicker. So you usually have excess clay, which means you can just throw it up. not there yet. I'm not there yet. I think I'm more nervous than I was yesterday. God, that's a really... I've got no idea.
I think the whole thing
Am I
is the
nodding?
potter is never aware they have a nod. They always deny they have a nod. I don't have a nod. Literally.
I'm
nod,
watching.
so-
I'm sort of watching here where my hands are, or just behind my hands, I suppose. Yeah, it's a weird one. It's not something that you're conscious of doing. So I am now. Yeah, I do love a bit of loud music when I'm working. So leading with your inside hand, controlling with your outside hand, so that your inside hand is in front of your outside hand. So it's in a similar way to pulling up. There's a slight difference, and by moving your hands closer or further apart, you can alter the torque, the tension that you're putting on the pot. So if you're trying to be very gentle, then you move your hands further apart. Right, so that is tape measure. Eventually everything becomes the same colour as clay and you just can't blooming see anything. Everything's camouflage.
I'm intrigued, Adam. How many times do you do this where you measure it and you don't actually have to sit back and alter? Do you ever get it spot on?
Well, I wouldn't have to. I normally barely measure because I'd have all my sections thrown to a given point.
Yeah.
And then I'd have all my tops thrown to a marker again.
You don't have to
And
go back to it.
essentially, if you set your marker right,
Yeah, you don't have to.
then
go
you
back.
don't really have to. Right, nasty noise again. Oh dear. I probably unwisely, has anyone got a lighter? I lent the Turkish boys my bottle of gas. And I think there's some left in it, but they nicked my lighter. Have you? My dad used to say 4 Hail Marys for his timing, but I gave that up a long time ago.
Oh, yes, we're going to have a look at the high-tech scoring tool.
It's a very old, worn-out fork. You get quite attached to things because, you know, I do actually go through forks. They wear out fairly quickly.
The question is, in your normal working conditions, would you let them air dry, or would you always be using the blowtorch to get them to the level of hardness?
So I use a combination. It depends quite a lot on the weather. If I'm doing a big batch, say, if I'm doing a dozen big pots, I will tend to throw the sections at the end of the day. You know, I make something in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I'll make the base section, the first one you saw me making, and I will then leave those to air dry. And I might go and wrap them up before I go to bed, or I might leave them until the morning. Just depends on what I judge is going to be safe, because there's nothing worse than sections that are too hard. Also, if you leave them uncovered, they can, depending on the kind of the atmosphere and the drafts in your workshop or room, they can dry unevenly, and that will mean you've got a hard and a soft spot, which will manifest as a wonky pot, essentially.
Did you say you left them turning on your wheels sometimes?
So yeah, if I'm doing a very big pot or a big jar, as you build it up, I will fix my pedal so that on the wheel, so that it rotates, and in that way, it's guaranteed to dry evenly. So you don't have to worry about, you know, the drafts or an uneven drying. So first I join with my fingers, because you can actually move the two sections around with your fingers, because you can feel, and then I pick the tools up. So I have one on the inside and one on the outside. And the joints, obviously you need to sort of give them an extra bit of attention to kind of really work the joint to make sure you've got a nice strong bond. Also, if you use a blowtorch, generally speaking, the rim section where you join, i.e. the joint, will be stiffer than the rest of the pot, so the top and the bottom. And once you kind of understand that, then you can actually change the form slightly, so you can work out, bring out further the form either side of the join to compensate for the shrinkage, because obviously the shrinkage is greater where you've taken more moisture out at the join.
Do you turn your pots at all?
Large ones like this. If you want, you can. I don't on the outside. I sometimes might take an inch or so off the base. You can just bring the base in to make it look more elegant. But other than that, no, I wouldn't.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? Oh, I can't hear it again.
Oh, the rate of firing. Yeah. It's about 18 hours to top temperature, but it really depends on the actual piece you're firing. So something like this is not, it's not more than an inch thick anywhere. Possibly the rim might be slightly more. But ultimately, we also put them through a dehumidifier. So because the workshop isn't big enough to hold more than about a week's work, 2 weeks' work, say, that means that we use a drying chamber to dry the pots, and that can be done in 3 days. So if you load it on a Monday, they can literally be in the kiln on the Wednesday. And that way you keep a constant through flow of wares without stacking things up in every corner. Yeah, with very large pots, obviously, we slow the firing down beyond that. And in fact, we just fired a sculptural piece that was sort of 4 inches thick. And that you take very slowly, you go up over several days and keep it, at 80 or 90 degrees for 10 hours. And then you go slowly to 400, slowly to 600. Once you're past about 750, 780, then go a bit faster. But with large stuff, not more than 65 degrees an hour. And that's when it's red. That's after it's red heat. That would be, that would be if it's bisqued, obviously, then you don't have that problem. But yeah, all these pots are only once fired, so they definitely need a preheat. Yeah. They are glazed and they are stoneware. I'm, I love earthenware, and I have made large jars, slipped them, put glaze on them, but these things are really too big to go in a house, so I sort of think of them as focal points for gardens, really, I suppose, for outside spaces. And because earthenware glaze eventually pops off in the frost, to make a glazed piece, I've been persuaded to make stoneware pieces that mean they're not going to fall to pieces in the frost. I mean, the clay body itself doesn't fall to pieces, but the glaze comes off, which is really annoying.
What's the weight of that piece?
This piece, this is, I think it's 11 pounds. I don't know whether I've measured that, I can't remember. A
Do you
failure
have
rate.
much of a failure rate?
We do, yeah. I mean, do you mean failure during making, or failure? There's greenware failure, there's firing failure, there's, human error failure. There's failure always. We try and keep seconds below 5%, but it is a constant struggle. Sure, this is. There we go. Just setting fire to my apron. Oops.
Do you use multiple glazes on your stoneware?
They're all single glazes. The one in the centre of the room is an ash glaze made with wood ash from my wood burner. So it's a kind of mixed hardwood ash glaze. And the other glaze is a Temmaku glaze that works really well in a wood firing because the kind of surface where the ash settles reacts and causes lovely little crystals. So they're both single glazes. However, actually I lie, because the rim of the two dark jars is, I brushed on ash glaze just for a bit of contrast. Have we got any mark makers in the crowd? Does anyone like making big marks? Big mark makers.
Big mark makers. Oh, my Lord. Jim's a big mark maker right there. Jim, you're a big mark maker. That's what you do.
Yeah?
Go on.
Go on, Jim.
Come on, Jim.
Once I slip it.
Get your cameras ready for Jim making some big marks. I'll just repeat the question. Is it just the type of clay that makes the pots frost resistant for outside, or is it the way you make them? Or the glaze?
That's a good question. Well, because stoneware's vitrified, it's non-porous. So if you can imagine water freezing in a porous body, it will expand, and over time, over many freezes and thaws, it will fracture and exfoliate the clay. Ram-pressed machine-made pots, because of the way the platelets line up, they're particularly prone to frost. It is also the clay body itself that you use, but it is also the firing temperature and the porosity of the pot which is affected by the firing temperature.
Seeing as we have Keith's fantastic demonstration, I did want to, as we have it here, open, if you can actually get a camera on this, it's a rare opportunity to see the cross-section and just how absolutely extraordinary it is in terms of its evenness up through the body. Shame to let that bit of learning stay on the floor. I'm also kind of amazed how plastic it still is even at the bottom. Sorry? Is that pot going to be fired here? I don't think
I wish I could, but it's not possible, I don't think. One, I don't think there's a kiln big. In fact, I could use the Turkish kiln, but it's completely wet. So these things take a couple of days to dry enough just to physically get them off the bat. So no, unfortunately, this will be going the same way the first one did. Yeah. There's a rubber kidney if you prefer, rather than your fingers, or
Is the slip a different clay?
this is about 6 parts the same clay as the clay body, and about 1 part high class. So it's a kind of peachy Mediterranean clay colour. No, you have to do that with your foot. Do you want me to do it? Oh, you can. Yeah. If I can just do the first one up here, just because it.
You stole my thunder.
Nice.
It's a long way around here.
Lovely.
Beautiful. I know. I knew you were going to aim for me.
Thank you, Jim.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
All right, he got me. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Adam. That was brilliant. And it's lunch now, and we'll be back at 1:15 with Thomas Bowley and Tony Lucy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.